An inspired team doesn't exist without an inspired leader. So it really comes back to the mission and vision. Who do we want to be seen as? What do we want to give? And whatever that is, you've really laid out in your vision statement, in your mission statement, and everybody's a part of it.
This is Growth in Dentistry, a dental intelligence podcast, where we ask the question, what does growth in dentistry mean to you? I'm Steve Jensen, a dated dental nerd and your host.
This is the Growth in Dentistry podcast, where we ask the question, what does growth in dentistry mean to you? My name is Steve Jensen, your host, and I am very excited for our conversation today. Now, before I introduce our guest, a quick shout out to Dental Intelligence for sponsoring this podcast and being willing to put dollars behind getting great education out into the space. We couldn't do this without them. As always, for the new listeners and the old listeners, Dental Intelligence is offering a $50 gift card if you'll just check out what they're doing at get.dentalintel.com/podcast. Now, without any further ado, I am excited to introduce our guest, Kerry Strain from Strain Management. And I'll share a few things here, but then I'm going to have Kelly share a little bit more about what he's been doing, because he's been in this for a long time. So founded Strain Consulting back in 1992, did his undergrad in business administration and accounting, certainly has a mind to help the business of dentistry. And Kerry, what's really impressed me is that a lot of folks start a business. You know, I have all these friends that are like, I want to start this business, build something, and then sell it off and like move on as if that's the target. And I'm just super impressed with the fact that you started a company and you've been running this thing for over 30 years. So I would love, for listeners, two things here. One, we have a wealth of knowledge that we'll try to gain from Kerry in the next 20 to 25 minutes and bring some of his knowledge out for the listeners. And then two, I would just love to hear, Kerry, like what's kept you in the game? Like what has kept Kerry excited about dentistry across the last 30 years?
Well, thanks, Steve. That's a great question. There's different seasons to your career, right? You enter because it meets some basic need of yours to fund and take care of your family. And you've got a career choice and got to go out and collect the money. And we all start off with that. And prior to being in dental consulting, I was in public accounting, and it's what led me to become the accidental dental consultant, because I was just trying to help a dear friend of mine way back in the late 80s and early 90s, and more dentists kept coming my way. And I found it very intriguing that they thought just because I was preparing financial statements and tax returns that I knew how to run a business. I knew how to run a business well enough to pay for my lifestyle, as they were trying to do for theirs. And I stepped into the role of wanting to help them define what their purpose was. And I think for me, and being in the business along with my wife and business partner, Olivia, 30 plus years, is because we love who we serve. Mm-hmm. You've really got to be connected with the why behind the what you do. Because at some point in time, if it's not there, you're going to look for another why. Mm-hmm. Once you get done serving and you have enough money saved, which very few people do anyway. I mean, the reality is fewer than 5% of dentists are economically prepared for retirement. Mm-hmm. And so they have to keep working. They're working into their 60s and their 70s and into their 80s. And unless they can really be passionate about the why and what they do, and we're fortunate that we meet a lot of people that are, then they're not going to stay committed to shaping the behavior that drives the fulfillment in the mind of the customer and the team members that serve with them, that the vision and the brand represents. I mean, the brand is defined as the sum of the characteristics of your promise. Mm-hmm. So when you really think about it, what is your promise? A patient's moved into your world, they've entered it, they've trusted you, and they want to be cared for. That's an awesome responsibility. I thought it was great to be in the accounting business, but being in the dental business is even better. I mean, you get to touch people's lives. You get to take the pain away, bring the joy to their world, be a prevention specialist, cosmetic specialist. I mean, it's just thoroughly, for my clients and everything I've seen them enjoy, a very fulfilling experience, let alone what it does for them personally, economically, and from a time management standpoint. Once those tests are met, it really what ignites you is your mission and the vision that you've shaped for what you want to give and what you want to experience. And when that's in place, look out, powerful things can happen.
Yeah, I love that. I couldn't agree more. I'm going to say this. I've said it before. I'm going to say it again. I think a lot of people miss the fact that a dental practice in every community, there's a bunch of dental practices, and the majority of people that live in that area are flowing every 6 months through that business in a way that you just don't in almost any other business you could possibly have. And it's a core part of a community that I find, in a similar way, a lot of passion and a lot of excitement to be involved in. Go ahead, Kerry.
Yeah, well, and I was going to add, it's just not the owner. Strategy that a practice commits to deploy through every aspect of every one of the operating policies is everyone's everyday job. Everyone is responsible for understanding where we are, where we want to be with respect to providing an awesome experience for that patient, and be committed to delivering it. The response you're going to see in acceptance rates, reappointment rates, people keeping their appointments, paying their bill, referring their family and friends, all those things are the consequence of an inspired team. And an inspired team doesn't exist without an inspired leader. So it really comes back to the mission and vision. Who do we want to be seen as? What do we want to give? And whatever that is, you've really laid out in your vision statement, in your mission statement, and everybody's a part of it. And when great teams come together and are excited about how we can make a difference, phenomenal things jump off the page when we look at the screen at Dental Intel.
No, I'm going to keep diving in on that because that's like leading into where I want to go. So I'm going to set the stage this way. In order for, I think most of our listeners are interested in growing their business. They want to do bigger, badder things. And the reality is this, in order to do bigger, badder things, it is so helpful to talk to and listen to folks who are in that like up-leveled place. Like where do you dream that you want to be as a dental professional, and go find people who are already in that place and ask them questions and listen to what they're doing. So you definitely fit the mold. I think I'll not share specifics here out of the gates, but I'll just share with the listeners that Strain Dental Management and those 4,000 clients they've worked with consistently outperforms the market on nearly every metric that I look at. So they're definitely in a position where they've learned a ton over the last 30 years. And if you're looking to up-level your practice, engaging with Kerry and his team and listening to what he has to share today will definitely help you with that. So with that in mind, the first thing, I'm a huge believer in the quote that, Weston, our founder, would always share, and that's that when performance is measured, performance improves. But it's not always easy as just saying, hey, you need to look at numbers. So Kerry, what will help? And you started to speak to this, but ultimately, how do you get dental professionals, owners, doctors, team members energized or excited about actually looking at data and metrics? Like what's the process to get someone there?
Well, there's two camps. First, there's a camp of people that just aren't earning enough money and they're falling behind. They can't borrow today, or maybe they've already borrowed to their limit. They don't understand how their business supports their life. So the very first phase with working with all of our clients is to conduct a comprehensive practice analysis that includes the personal life. I want to know financially, are they living the life they want to live? Are they working the hours they want to work? And I often find if they're not living the life they want to live, they don't want to keep working the hours they want to work. Because there's such a distraction when there's an economic crisis in their life and they can't satisfy the family needs, and it really thwarts their enthusiasm. So we have to begin with, where are they at today economically? Where do they want to be? And what does that budget look like? I never forget one doctor I sat with in San Francisco after working with her for several years. And she goes, my God, I've made $500,000 more last year and I never saw a penny of it. I said, well, you did. I said, if you made $500,000 more, you probably had operating expenses incrementally of around 40%. She was a sole practitioner. There's $300,000 left. You probably paid taxes, state of California, $150,000.
Painful.
And then it ended up being $150,000 left over. I said, you didn't have any working capital. We finally got current on your bills. They weren't 60 days past due. They're current. That ate up about 80,000 of the 150. And the balance is we paid off your line of credit and your credit cards. You're now at zero because you were upside down. So be thankful that we've objectively reviewed where you are today versus where you were then. And now, of course, years of dedication. She's funded her retirement. She's living the life she wants to live. And without that negativity, she's really not distracted, and it's not sapping her energy as she comes to work and deals with all the challenges she faces as a business owner in California today. So we have to get past that, the economics there. Once that is being taken care of, we can really focus on what's the potential of the practice. And when we look at the potential of a practice and we set goals, we look at four things. We want to know the facility, how many treatment rooms do you have? And I'll speak in terms of a general dental practice or a pediatric practice right now. Certainly we work with orthodontic groups, endodontic groups, oral surgeons. I've worked with the biggest oral surgery groups in the world. Both of them are now owned by private equity. Many of our clients are investor backed, because the investors want to know that there's a pathway to the projections that they've bought into when they made the investment. So a portion of our business is made up of DSOs and the work there, as well as individual practices. And the funny thing is, Steve, I would say that 98% of our practices are doing more than $1.5 million to $2 million when we meet them. First thing this morning, I was on the phone with a client who called me, and just before COVID, his sole practice was doing 10 million. Now he's doing 22 million. And he just employed the strategies with our support. We're like the advisors for what can happen. And then we're the guardrails to keep him on that journey so he doesn't waste time and he accelerates accordingly. But once we get to the point where you don't have that stress with the non-business environment, now you can focus on the patient base, the facility, the teams, and last, the economics. So if I'm looking at a 5 or 6 treatment room practice, I'm looking at 1 doctor, 2 hygienists, 1 doctor, 3 hygienists. In some states, we have a limitation as to how many hygienists we can have per doctor. But I do know this. There's a correlation between highly productive practices and large hygiene departments. As a matter of fact, we were just at a dental conference in Denver last week and saw a lot of DI people there. But one of the big tenets that people are now discovering is the super GP practice. Mm-hmm. So GPs need to think in terms of growing to approximately 1,500 to 2,000 patients in continuing care per dentist, full-time equivalent. 2 dentists, 4,000. 3 dentists, 6,000. Because if you don't have the recurring customer flow to keep the doctor away from the lower days that would appear on the patient, on the provider pulse board, or we might see it on the performance board and ultimately see it in the collection board, right? We have the peaks. I'm not worried about taking peaks first phase that much harder. I just want to get the balance brought up to where they should be. When that happens, we've got the collections that we need to improve profitability. So when we look at a practice that has really gone to that level of $1.5 million and more, those owners have an appetite for accomplishment and results. And they typically have 1, 2, 3, maybe many patients, team members that have an appetite for delivering on that mission with those patients as well. These are the people that are talking about, how do I get this patient same-day dentistry done? How do I move this patient out of a prophy into periotherapy and perio maintenance if they're needed according to the practice's clinical philosophy? How do I make sure we're not owed any money from patients? I mean, it just freaks me out to go to the collection board at any time and go to the AR aging report, and I pull it up, Steve, and it just makes me nervous. No dentist has ever told me they want to be owed money from patients, but I'm sure if DI ran the report, you'd find there's billions of dollars that are owed to practices from patients, let alone past due insurance claims. And because they don't know how to find it in Eaglesoft or Open Dental or Dentrix or any one of the practice management softwares you sync with, they can't find it. It's not brought down to a level where it's understandable. And I'm not here to necessarily train everybody on how to be masters at DI. It takes a lot of years. I've been a student of Dental Intel for many, many years. And each week, something new comes to me that I learn. And in the context of everything else that I look at DI, it keeps me awake at night thinking about the possibilities of helping people. And you ask what keeps me going at my advanced age. I may look like I'm 30.
You're not that old. Still a young buck.
I'm 67. Next year I'll be 68. Number one, I am extremely energized by positive reinforcement. I think we all are. I know we all are. Performance management theory. And I'm highly energized to not let people down. And I think my dentists feel the same way. I know they do, because I've met countless dentists who on Saturdays and Sundays go in to help their patients. They don't want them to be in pain. Well, for me, it's a different type of pain. It's the kind of pain that an owner feels knowing that overhead's creeping up on them. Their collections aren't keeping up with production. Production's not keeping up with the overhead. They're running out of cash. They can't fund their retirement. They're starting to borrow on their line of credit. They couldn't take the time off to be with the family. We can create a balanced plan, but it starts with that owner who's in absolute control of the purse strings and the reins of this practice and understands that they have to make a difference. The other day, I was just talking to one of my clients, and he was saying, God, hygiene compensation is going through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
In my market, I have to offer $45 an hour now. And we have practices that offer $75 an hour or $35 an hour. Every market is different. He goes, and if I offer 45 to this person, I'm going to have to deal with what am I paying everybody else? How am I going to recover that? And I said, well, it's pretty simple. I said, you've only got 5% of your patients in perio maintenance. When I go look at the fluoride percentage, you're down at 24%. When I look at the patients per hour and I only see patient appointments per hour, I see at 0.75. That means you're losing 2 out of 8 appointments a day. It's all right there. There's a story of how you're leading, and the numbers don't lie. People do. We lie to ourselves. It's time to, time to get past that and take an honest look at what you've got and how you're leading. But I said to him, I want to put together an incentive plan just for your hygienists, where they get paid a percentage of the net production as listed on the provider pulse. Okay. And we want to take that times a percentage minus our wages. So how am I going to get it there? I said, doctor, you could either point your finger at your hygienist, or you'll realize there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. And you're the person who's in charge of the treatment planning. You're the person who's in charge of leading your team. You're the person who's shaping their behavior with direction and with positive reinforcement or redirection. So it's entirely up to you. And you need the facts. You need the key to the resilience is not optimistic thinking. The key is accurate thinking. And with the power of the information to dental intel, you can eliminate the ambiguity.
Mm-hmm. I want to jump in here. There's 2 things I want to say. One, first, Carrie, as I'm listening to you, just so you know, your passion, unrelenting passion, is so refreshing and rare. So thank you for being you. And then second, one of the questions I have on my docket is strain management consulting is able to get an output that I'm very impressed by. So the average dental practice, the annual patient value is $644. So like when you just think through that one, it's basically 2 hygiene visits, a couple of simple fillings, and that's it, right? So that's the average practice. Now, the average strain consulting practice, so just so everyone knows, like that means they've got their low performers are probably average and their high performers are above this, but the average strain consulting practice is $200 above that per year, which is exceptional. And there's different levers you can pull to get there. Just so listeners connect the dots you just shared a story about hygiene, right? That's one place where you can tweak that number up. Simple things like fluoride and sealants and perio, and focusing on those levers. Where are, Carrie, I'm going to move you in this direction. What are some of other levers you guys might be training on or shining light on that might improve that annual patient value? And how are you guys able to get such excellent outcomes?
There's many data points in DI. Yeah. The key is to shape what you want your team to do in exchange for the opportunity to work with you, for you. And those things or behaviors that you want them to implement are housed within the written operating policies. Those policies define the why of our new patient policy or our financial policy or our scheduling policy, the what we do, the who does it, and the follow-up with where we need to discover whether or not we're meeting the standard we set for the practice. It's all there, but it's not in DI until you've defined it. That's where we begin. Then you've got to have a management system to train people on how to do it your way, and then lead them to implement. And you just can't take your foot off the gas when it comes to leading and accountability. You got to keep your foot on the gas. You're going to have a daily huddle. Of course, it's easy with your daily huddle icon to follow the bouncing ball. We're going to have a weekly team meeting. We're going to have a monthly department meeting and strategy meeting. We're going to have a quarterly review, a semi-annual. I mean, this is how businesses operate. Most businesses grow to a certain level and then they plateau. You want me to tell you what governs that plateau?
In fact, I was going to say the same thing. You mentioned that you primarily work with practices that are already at $1 million, and that's probably because
$1.5 million to $2 million to $5 million to $10 million.
They hit that mark, and then that's when like earnings start to become comfortable. They want to grow, but they're not sure how to take some of their success and actually like scale it, right? So it starts to do that. Yeah. So talk us through that, Carrie. Sorry.
Everybody has this passion to grow, and often it's a selfish passion. I want to grow to make X dollars a month, $5 a year, because I need to take care of my family and my kids. And there's the owner feeling the pressure. And then we get to that level
Mhm.
and they kind of plateau and they go, I don't want to hold people accountable anymore. I don't want to look at my fee schedule. I don't want to be seen as being money oriented. That's bad. And eventually overhead creeps up and you don't have that same earning power and it starts to go down. And making money is not bad. It's a sign of success that you've been rewarded for doing the things that the market's responding to, whether you own a grocery store or a automotive store, a landscaping business, or a dental practice.
Mhm.
So that plateau is typically reached when that doctor feels economically comfortable. And then they're going to say at the local dental society, well, it's not about money to me. Sure as heck it is. If you have a reduction, you're going to work your butt off again to get it back up. It's all about the money. Come on. And it is for your team. I used to say, Steve, that employees are far more entrepreneurial than owners. And today, since COVID, they're hungry for cash today, even paramount to a 401k and medical plan and paid type PTO. And people have become very dependent on that extra income that COVID provided us with.
Yep.
And believe me, it's running out. Government can't dish it out. And we have to realize that, things are costing more than ever, but team members are costing more. When I look at a team member wants $1 an hour raise, we raise revenue by a minimum of $10 an hour.
Mhm.
We've got to raise goals because we've got to cover the spread. It's more than just the profitability. It's technology. It's understanding where I need to invest today, et cetera. So we see that when people focus on themselves, they plateau. When they focus on the patients, we just keep growing. I mean, ultimately, if you have a limited facility, there is a computation for how many patients you can manage. Do you know what that is, Steve?
I would love to hear it.
There's an absolute equation for how many patients the practice can manage. Number one, tell me how many active patients you've got. So I'd go to Patient Finder, right?
Mhm.
Either that or the monthly report. It's all there, some data. But there's an assumption, and you can modify it. Dental Intel is flexible. Go into Patient Finder and edit one of your filters that says, we're only looking back in the last 548 days to define an active patient. There's a lot of different markets out there. I mean, if we're in the mountains of South Dakota versus in San Francisco, employee attrition could be higher in San Francisco, obviously, than it is in Spearfish, South Dakota.
Mhm.
Because people that move to Spearfish don't ever want to move away. They come from San Francisco, I guess, today. But that being said, the equation of how many patients you can manage is not how many active patients you got. It's how many people you can fit into hygiene. Because if you're going to deliver on your promise, my friend, you're going to make darn sure that your patients are taken care of. Even if they've got dentures, you're going to schedule them for an annual reline check. And today we're looking at all on 4 cases, permanent dentures. So if your capacity is driven by only 2 hygienists, you've only got room for 1,200 patients. And if your demand is 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 patients, what do you want to do with all those patients you can't see? I used to have a seminar entitled, You Don't Have a Right to Take on a New Patient Until You've Learned to Meet the Needs of Your Existing Patients.
I like that.
And truly what I tell dentists, and I was talking to one just the other day and was on the phone with her and she goes, well, I've got 8 ops, but I don't know if I want an associate. And I said, well, good. How many patients you got? Well, I got 3,000. I said, how many hygienists you got? She goes, well, I got 3. I said, well, good. You get to fire 1,200 patients. She goes, what do you mean? I said, well, your capacity is only 1,800 people. Each hygienist seeing 8 patients a day, 4 days a week. There's a computation.
Matter of math. Yep.
It isn't geometry. It's math, addition and subtraction and multiplication. And you just define how many appointments you could see if they were all filled every week.
Mhm.
And if you go into Provider Pulse and you look at the hygienists and how many appointments they have per hour, it should be 1. If they're not seeing patients 1 per hour, you probably got a delivery rate of some percentage of 100%. So look at that. It's all there. It's quite illuminating. But you've got that capacity. And to the extent you have more patients than you can see and you're getting new ones, what good's it do to take them if you don't have a plan to take care of them?
Mhm.
So now you get to make a decision. Do I move out of network? Do I increase my fee schedule? Do I bring on an associate? These are all questions that are addressed by the owner with somebody who can advise them. Once you realize patient demand greater than supply creates an inflection point. What are you going to do about it? Go from there. So many other data points to consider, Steve, but that's a big one.
Yeah, that is a big one. In fact, like there's so many angles you could go from that, right? In terms of growing the business, adding operatory space, going out of network, lots of considerations there. But for sure, in my mind, there's an opportunity either to really put the pedal onto patient growth or start to consider, hey, can I tweak, the number I mentioned a few minutes ago is annual patient value. If that number is a little bit low, then let's start pulling some of the levers you've mentioned to improve that one before we scale. I'd rather scale with annual patient value at 800 than scale with annual patient value at 6, right?
2 points to add to that. If you go to the performance board, to the new patient report, and you click on it, and you just want to look at last month, say go to June or July, you can bring it up and then sort it by date of next hygiene appointment.
Yep.
And if they're not appointed, that's a clue. Somebody's walking out without an appointment. That's enough to make you nervous, because then your cost of acquisition just skyrockets. Then, of course, you can go to the elective case acceptance. And if you're doing all this wonderful treatment planning, it sounds good. I presented a $50,000, $100,000 case and $80,000 case. And you look at last month and you put in your name as the doctor, Dr. Steve, and it just sorts all your treatment plans presented. Then we look at what got scheduled: 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Now, how gratifying it was that you got to share your opinion, but nobody bought it. And why aren't they buying it? That's when you've got to flip out and go, how are we offering them a way to pay for it? Third-party financing, that's an issue. And then, of course, you get a collection issue. Well, if it's not happening, you're not getting the treatment plan acceptance because you're not talking about appropriate financial arrangements and third-party financing, and you're not a bank. Then, hopefully you activated DI payments and you're getting paid along the way, because our clients that weren't collecting co-payments are surging their collections by just going to the DI payments. And wherever that's housed today, I use some old terms, but you know what I mean. You've got the solution. They just have to think about who's going to be asked to do what, by when, and report back to you no later than the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that. I've heard in the conversation today the importance of having visibility into performance, understanding where you're at today, what your goals are. I have heard implementing systems of accountability. If people haven't heard anything, hopefully you're hearing what Carrie's sharing around that, right? That's so key to have this feedback loop where an employee knows what success looks like, and then they'll be entrepreneurial minded to get to that level of success that you're asking them to hit. And then lots of different levers that you've discussed that you can use to improve the business. Now,
there's so many.
We're running up on time. We always end with a question. What does growth in dentistry mean to you? So I would love to hear, Carrie, in your mind, what does growth in dentistry mean?
Growth in dentistry. I think it'll be important for the dental community to remain a leader in the mind of their customers, that they improve the percentage of patients who come back on a recurring basis.
Yeah.
I've read some white papers out there recently that say 42% of the group practices patient base are all that are coming back for continuing care. Our practices hover somewhere between 68 and 88%. So when we look at the value that we generate per year per patient, it's because we're in contact with them. They're not lying fallow, unscheduled. We're building that relationship, and every point of contact with them is an opportunity to impress, delight them, or do nothing, which is to disappoint them. Every point of contact. And doing nothing is doing something to shaping their behavior not to come back. Because if it's not important to you and you're not excited about seeing them, then they're not going to be that thrilled to think about you when the problem comes up. They're going to look for somebody else eventually. So I think growth in dentistry is really about making sure your promise is defined, shared, understood, and respected with the appropriate levels of response that you want. People reappoint, they keep their appointment, they pay your bill. When you move out of network, they stay with you. You have an in-house dental plan. So many things, and you're never going to be owed money. There's two things that you don't want to ever see happen, and DI can tell you in a nanosecond. You don't want to have people walk out without their appointment. It's right in the huddle, right, Steve? Every day, who didn't reappoint? Somebody needs to, at the end of that huddle, be following up and getting a hold of those people. It's more than just sending a follow-up here or having a computer automated follow-up that nobody's responsible for. Somebody's got to understand they're responsible for curing the mistake that occurred, and the other one's collecting the money, let alone accepting treatment plans. Too many people today are walking out today, this very half hour that we've been on this call, thousands of people have walked out with treatment that the doctors just defined, presented to them, insurance funds available to pay for it now, or a considerable part of it, and their next appointment is in 2024 for hygiene, and nobody focused on making sure that they were seen this year to use their subsidy with their dental insurance benefit and get the work done that the doctor prescribed because he or she thought it was the best thing for them. Growth in dentistry is going to occur when that happens. It is an attractive industry, as is evidenced by the growth in the dental support organization worlds, where professional management teams are in place to provide accounting, HR, payroll, legal, contract negotiation, revenue cycle management. And those entities are owned in some cases by doctors, but investors. And so there's all kinds of new models being developed out there. But at the core of it is a professional who's been licensed by your state to have an opinion that they've verified is a quality that they need to have you licensed in their state. And it's your responsibility as the doctor to make sure your entire team understands what it is and how at every point of contact with a patient, when you can't be there to represent yourself, you've hired employees to represent you throughout the day. And a team that understands that in the context of that leader's mission and vision and values and integrity and character is a team that's going to come together to make great things happen. Byproduct will be growth to the level you want it. And you can go from there.
What a great response. I especially love the vision of, hey, as an industry, if we can improve the number of patients in this country engaging with our businesses, that shows that on the whole, we are providing better and greater and more innovative service to them that they want and need. And what a great vision. Well, Carrie, thank you for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. If I were a listener, I imagine I would want to engage with you. So I know you've always, I'll give the shout out for you. Carrie and his team are willing to offer an hour-long consult with you, which is like super kind. I would love to have your mind on our business. So for all those listening, absolutely, I'd want them to engage with you. What's the best way to get in contact with you and your team?
Go to our website, strain, straine.com, and just say, I want to go into the calendar and schedule an appointment. If you want to request me, you can go to our team listing. I'm kind of at the top of the page. You can email me and I'm glad to respond to you. And my email is carrie@strain.com. We'll set up an hour to meet with you. And I just had a call with a gentleman up in Tacoma, Washington yesterday. And we're actually we have our next call set up through Zoom to look at his dental intel reports on his screen. And I'm going to help him navigate through it, which will be new for him because he's not really using it and he's not using it. And guess who else is not using it, Steve? The team.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make the story come to life around what he tells me he wants. And we're going to come up with a 3-step recommendation. We're not here to train you. DI trains you. They provide great training. We're here to help you apply it. But honestly, I think it takes 10,000 hours of commitment, certainly has for me, to reach that next level of capability so I can navigate in and out of it. Don't be afraid to look at a report and learn. There's plenty of videos to learn from. But if you need somebody over your shoulder, we're happy to do it through the 1-hour appointment. Or if you want to be a client of ours, we can talk about that at that time.
Awesome. And I'll make sure I include contact information in the show notes. Carrie, I love your willingness to engage directly with clients and how involved you stayed. So super cool. Speaks a lot to your business and the way that you guys have grown. Thanks everyone for listening. This has been a Growth in Dentistry podcast. We are grateful for Carrie for joining once again, and we will see you guys next time. Keep growing.